Hello there, little masters, and welcome once again to the Prancing Pony Podcast.
My Gavanden, my friends. I'm Shawn Marchese, and today I'm joined by... I'm feeling elvish today, so how about the Finrod to my Turgon, Alan Sisto?
Well, thanks, Shawn, I think. I kind of like being the ruler of a vast realm filled with great treasures, an elf of honor and all that. Not sure about the cave thing. I gotta get outside now and then.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, maybe next time I can be Finrod, and I'll make you the one whose heart yearns for Tyrion upon... No.
Well, they're both doomed, so I'm not sure it really matters much.
True.
Well, folks, tonight we invite you to picture yourself in the Hall of Fire at Rivendell and pull up a chair while we go over some of those maps that Elrond must have kept all over the place. It's time for the Silmarillion, Chapter 14 of Beleriand and its Realms.
Yeah, and we want you to not make the same mistake that Pippin made, which was not to look at the maps because he thought all the plans seemed to be in more competent hands. We want you to look at the map with us.
Well, please do that, because if you're relying on us to be the more competent hands, well, you have other problems.
Yeah, go not to us for counsel, as Frodo said of the elves.
Well, of course, we're kidding. We think you're in good hands with us, and we do think we've got a good show for you today. This really is the Hall of Fire at Rivendell tonight, because, as Gandalf said of it, here you will hear many songs and tales, if you can keep awake. This is one of Tolkien's most notoriously dry chapters. There's not really any narrative, no fun character bits, no dramatic moments of dialogue, no dialogue period, no plot turns. Right. It's kind of like reading a description of a map. Yeah. I mean, I can't really think of anything like it in the Legendarium except maybe the Valaquenta, but even with the Valaquenta, you're learning about the Valar, and they're at least characters. You know, they have these interesting attributes, and they have cool names and epithets, and it's the kind of stuff we go nuts for as mythology fans. This has none of that because it really is about the land and the places. That is true, but it is still important. This chapter is what sets up who rules what realm in Beleriand, so even though there's a lot of geography to cover, you're going to find that we'll focus our discussion on the families and the chieftains themselves, and in Tolkien's words, the manner in which the chieftains of the Eldar held their lands. Yeah, exactly. And I think, as you said, Alan, it really is important because, if you want to understand the battles that are going to come, some of the migrations that are going to take place once men come on the scene, the alliances and the struggles, you really need to understand who rules where. Absolutely. But before we get into that, Shawn, does old Bartleman have anything in his bag for us tonight? Yes, he does, actually, Alan. Tonight we've got... Handy, that Bartleman. Oh, yes. We keep him around. We keep him around for that reason. Today we've got some mail from a listener named Roy in Brussels, Belgium, who runs a very cool site called the Dwarrow Scholar. It's a self-described source for all things Dwarvish, and the site's at dwarrowscholar.com. And I'll put up all things Dwarvish? You mean I can buy my mithril coats there? Well, you might have to put in a special order for that one. But he's got so much cool stuff there. What about dwarven brides? I'd like one without the beard. Do they make those? I don't know. Do they make... We're all out of that model. Please. We're all out of that. Yeah, out of stock. He's got a ton of great information, some great Dwarvish language stuff, and I'll put up a link to it on the website. What's the URL? It's dwarrowscholar.com. Oh, okay. That's easy enough. And that's DWARROW scholar.com. That's that word Dwarrow that shows up in Dwarrow Delph, sort of an alternate form of the word dwarf. So Roy had some thoughts for us about our recent mention of the dwarves in a few episodes back. Well, that's good. We don't get enough comments about the dwarves, except from some of those Tauriel people. They send us lots of mail. But when I saw kind of what his credentials were, I thought maybe he was going to give us a little grief about the whole Gun Hirim thing that we were having fun with a while back. But surprisingly, he actually took the high road, unlike us. Yeah. He wrote in saying, firstly, some very nice things to say about it. He said, firstly, what I like podcast. Hearing nice things. Go ahead. What do you say? Yes, we'll start with some nice things. Firstly, what a podcast. I absolutely love the podcast. It has become a staple of my all Tolkien podcast diet. Not only do I love how well you prepare for these, you can tell, keep it up, but your no rush, yet to the point attitude is definitely what I enjoy in a podcast. Prepare? What is this prepare of which you speak? I wish I could pretend we did this off the cuff, but we would do a little bit of homework. We're not nearly that
that smart.
Not that well prepared. Not that, yeah. Well, I happen to have it all memorized.
Right, yes. Oh, yes. It's all up here. It's all up here. He goes on to say, I personally love all things Dwarvish, hence my website, and was happy to hear you discussed Khuzdul in episode 18, Menegroth, Love It or List It. So first of all, I did want to say thank you, Roy, for the very nice words, or rather, and I'm going to try this, Akmenruki Astu, which is something I learned from his website, and I believe it means, thank you wonderfully, or something.
Are you sure you're not reading from like the Belgian translation book? Like, if I had a beautiful body, would you hold it against me? I am no longer infected.
Oh, man, the old Monty Python.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what you just said. You might have said something like the FCC might come down and
I know.
talk to us about this.
He might be setting us up. We might be in some trouble. And at any rate, I'm probably horribly butchering the pronunciation, but that'll be my fault, not his.
Okay.
But interestingly, actually, his first comment for us was actually about my Khuzdul pronunciation. I kind of mentioned it briefly in the last episode, but Barliman didn't give us this message until right before we recorded that one, so it didn't really make the bag in time.
One thing pushes out another.
One thing pushes out another. But he said, I noticed, though, that you mentioned that KH, as seen in Khazad, is to be pronounced as the CH in the Scottish Lach, or the CH in the German Buch. This, I believe, is not the case, and I wish to clarify that. In Appendix E of Lord of the Rings, Professor Tolkien mentions in Dwarvish, which did not possess the sounds represented above, speaking of the Elvish and Mannish languages that were referenced in the previous paragraph, does not possess the sounds represented above by TH and CH, or KH. TH and KH are aspirates, that is, a T or a K followed by an H, more or less as in backhand and outhouse. Now, going back to Roy's email, he says, this may, of course, seem rather confusing, especially given the fact that Khuzdul has been constructed as a Semitic language, which usually contain plenty of those harsh-sounding fricative sounds.
Mm-hmm.
He says, he goes on, it is often mispronounced this way, and in fact, he says that Sir Christopher Lee, in the Fellowship of the Ring film, actually mispronounces Khazad-dûm. He says Khazad-dûm.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah. And,
but that is in the movies, so.
That is, yeah. Well, and Roy says, he's very, very gracious. He says the mistake is a common one, and if Sir Lee did it, then I have no doubt all are excused.
Yay, we are excused.
But he says, but after careful study, I believe the correct way of pronouncing Khazad would be Khazad, and not Khazad or even Khazad. I think I'm pronouncing that last one right.
Interesting.
I
don't even know that it takes careful study, because he's right. The
it's right there in
appendix makes it pretty
C.
clear.
It's right there, yeah. And I think I just
careful study in the appendix, the one place where it's really clear.
Reading the surface words. Yeah, it's exactly right. I mean,
and
it is confusing. Yeah, right. And it is confusing because we see, KH and Adonaic or black speech is pronounced a little, it's got that
it does
sound.
Well, and just like CH in Sindarin has that
exactly.
as well.
That's right.
And I think that's what we were mixing it up with. So
yeah, exactly. But it's worth noting that Khuzdul is an unrelated language. It was created by Aule, so it's not it's not related. It doesn't have the same lineage as Elvish and the Mannish languages. So basically there it's more like, as Tolkien says, backhand. It's basically a K with a strong puff of air.
Okay. So
Khazad-dûm, not Khazad-dûm.
Well, just as long as you don't say Zahadum, that's a whole nother planet.
Oh, yeah. That's Babylon 5, wasn't it? There's the Shadow Planet.
Yeah.
Or the space Balrogs. Do we have, was there a Kosh quote on that?
There's always, if you go to Zahadum, you will die.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah. I still love your Kosh voice. We need to work that in more often. Yeah, he says that
in Goliath. But yeah, who does he says that to
He says that to Gandalf. I mean
Sheridan.
I mean Captain Sheridan.
He is rather that Gandalf character, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. Babylon 5, great show. Check it out. Tolkien fans would love it.
You may skip most of the first season with our permission.
Yeah. Takes a little while to get started.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you, Roy, for correcting our pronunciation. Or I think actually this one's on me, Alan. Thank you for correcting my pronunciation.
I won't let you take all the blame.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Just a big piece of it.
And just most of it.
How Feanor of you.
Oh, man. So, yeah, thank you, Roy. And I guess thank you, Owley, for making it difficult.
Well, yeah.
And we had one more comment from Roy that I include since it's geography related. So I think it fits in nicely with this discussion.
Oh, okay.
He says, another somewhat unrelated mark I had concerned episode 19. I very much enjoyed the mention of how the clouds could have come to existence, as indeed they would have required the sun to form. This was your theory.
Yes,
you
yeah.
expounded on how.
I'm still not entirely sold on my own theory, but it's an interesting one.
It is interesting. Well, he's buying it, but he does have a question about it. He says, as you were discussing it, something struck me, perhaps something that was overlooked at the time Professor Tolkien wrote it. He says the three mountains of Khazad-dûm are named in Dwarvish, of course, and I'm going to try and get these right. Zirak-Zigil, Barazanbar, I think it is, and Bundushathur.
Yeah,
the last
those
one
all sound right.
Thank you. That last one, Bundushathur, which is Fanuadal in Sindarin, means cloudy head. Roy says one can't help but wonder, seeing that Khazad-dûm was built long before the rising of the sun and the existence of the first clouds, why it was named this. And, he's got a point.
Yeah.
I looked into just the languages, and cloudy head is actually a literal translation of both.
Okay, that would have been my first question then.
Yeah, it's literal translation of both Sindarin, Fanuadal, and then the Khuzdul Bundushathur. And I had to go into Treason of Isengard for the Dwarvish stuff.
My goodness.
Yeah. So I think it rules out, I think, probably what would have been the first possibility, which is that maybe this was a later mistranslation, by men who showed up after the sun.
Oh, right. That the Mannish version, that cloudy head, was not really a direct translation.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And maybe they just came up, they used that name. But I don't know. I wanted to get your thoughts on this because it does seem to be what it means. And do you have any thoughts on this? And so,
well, I can
your theory.
I can kind of see there are three possibilities I see here. The first one that comes to mind, and I think the most likely, is simply that the mountain peaks were not named at the same time as Khazad-dûm. The Dwarrow Delf
was... Okay,
maybe
so.
Exactly. Yeah. The Khazad-dûm itself, the Dwarrow Delf, was built long before the rising of the sun, and therefore the first clouds, if that theory is correct. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that the peaks above it had been given those names yet. Right.
Yeah,
right.
That makes sense, yeah.
Those names may have come much later. The second possibility, if the names indeed go back that far, is that cloudy head might refer more to the mists that would gather at the top of a mountain, even in clear weather. You know how you see a big mountain peak kind of creates its own little weather system. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and even the misty mountains themselves,
right.
Were named Hith-Iglir, I think, going back that far, and I think it was more reference to their height as opposed to or to the mists.
Exactly. The peaks are so high they look like they're in the mist. Mm-hmm. But a mountain, even when there are no clouds in the sky, a mountain's going to end up a lot of times having that kind of mist around the peak. Mm-hmm. The third possibility, of course, I hate to even consider this, is that I was incorrect. That the kindling of the clouds we talked about in that chapter didn't mean they just come into existence, but that they were, set on fire visually by the sun. There is that.
There is that possibility, and
remote though it may be.
You're very gracious to almost get that out. I know it's always hard to admit when we make a mistake.
Yeah, when mm-hmm.
A possible mistake.
A possible mistake. There you go. I like that.
Yeah. So excellent. Well, very good. Well, thank you, Roy, for those questions, and thank you again for the really amazing stuff on Khuzdul language and just Dwarvish culture in general on your site. Again, check out dwarrowscholar.com, and we'll have a link up to it on our websites.
We will. And
that's it for Barlaman's Bag today. But, Alan, I think you might know what time it is now.
Time for another Tolkien fun fact?
Yep. You got it. You got another Tolkien fun fact, but I'm going to let you take this one because you found it. So what do you got for us tonight?
Well, how very kind of you. I was realizing the other day that, I've not gotten a chance to do any of these, so I'm looking forward to this one.
I've hoarded them. I've got a fact hoard, like a word hoard.
A Formanos equivalent of Tolkien fun facts?
Yeah.
And you don't show them to anybody but your father and sons?
I keep them locked up. In a little locked box.
Well, once again, we're going to turn to Carpenter's biography. We've done what now? 3 or 4 Tolkien fun facts, and they've all come from Carpenter's biography. Mm-hmm. So if we haven't inspired you to go out and get a copy of this biography and read it, let's just be really direct about it. Go out and get a copy of this biography and read it.
Well, how can you argue with that voice? I mean, that's authority right there.
There it is. That the echo automatically adds authority and believability. They should do that at the presidential debates. That would be fun.
Yeah, they really should. But really, it's true. I mean, so much fun stuff in Carpenter's biography. I mean, Tolkien was just a...
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I interrupted you because it's what I do.
Yeah, well, you know, we do it too. We've been doing this long enough that I think we interrupt each other a lot. No, Tolkien was just a fun guy. I mean, he really just sort of leaps off the pages of Carpenter's biography. It's just this guy who just loved life and had a good time. He was certainly very academic, terrifyingly smart, but
he knew what to take seriously and
life.
what not to. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I found so really appealing about the Carpenter biography and why I recommend it, especially for people who haven't read any biographical material, is because it's just so eminently accessible. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love Shippey's Author of the Century and Road to Middle-earth, but those are a little harder to read. They're a little, well, especially Road to Middle-earth is very
scholarly.
Very scholarly. A lot of stuff about Old English and Middle English. And that's awesome stuff once you kind of get your arms around it. But for the first-time reader, for the guy who's maybe just read The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, Carpenter's biography is just eye-opening. And
it's really about the man himself.
It really is. Yeah, good stuff. So back to the fun fact. Tolkien himself took a hiatus in writing The Lord of the Rings in 1940. We're not sure why, except that, of course, he was a very busy man and he took a lot of breaks. Yeah. Which is why Lord of the Rings took like 12 years to write. Of course, it would have taken us like 80 without breaks. But at this point, the Fellowship had just reached Balin's tomb in Moria, or Khazad-dûm. Khazad-dûm. I just tried to say that correctly.
Yeah, there you go.
And so now I quote I quote Carpenter here. When work was resumed, Tolkien drew up outlines for the end of the story, which he did not imagine was more than a few chapters away.
Sorry, I just got...
That's just a little... I know. More than...
So this was about halfway through book 2.
Yeah.
And by which I mean book 2 of Fellowship,
right, exactly.
Not 2 Towers. Yeah, there's a whole 800 pages. Yeah.
So he didn't imagine it was more than a few chapters away, and began to sketch the episode where 2 of the hobbits encounter Treebeard, the being who is the ultimate expression of Tolkien's love and respect for trees. When eventually he came to write this chapter, so he told Neville Coghill, he modeled Treebeard's way of speaking, hrum, hroom, on the booming voice of C.S. Lewis. Now, there's not a lot of surviving audio of C.S. Lewis. In fact, I scoured and scoured and scoured, and the only one I could find was something from the BBC that when he gave talks from his book Mere Christianity. So I want to go ahead and play this so we can get a sample of C.S. Lewis's voice.
Oh, cool. This will be good.
Prayer.
Oh, sorry about that. Let's try that again.
In these talks, I've had to say a good deal about prayer. And before going on to my main subject tonight, I'd like to deal with a difficulty some people find about the whole idea of prayer. Somebody put it to me by saying, I can believe in God all right, but what I can't swallow is this idea of him listening to several 100 million human beings who are all addressing him at the same moment.
Fascinating.
Wow. That's interesting.
He's got an interesting voice.
I don't think I've ever heard C.S. Lewis speak at all before today.
No, and it's not as booming as I would have thought, but it's very...
after reading that, yeah.
It's hard to say, of course, because it's really tinny. I mean, this is clearly somebody recorded something off of the radio, who knows how many years ago, but this is the only stuff you could find. So, but yeah, it did.
So this is this is like listener archived stuff.
It sure sounds like it. Yeah. I mean, it's not like a BBC official thing.
Right.
I mean, if anybody can find more high quality surviving audio of C.S. Lewis' voice, we'd be grateful for that. But I really did look.
And if anybody can find the first few seasons of Doctor Who in the BBC archives, please let us know that as well. Because they managed to lose those too.
That's what I heard. Oh,
I digress.
What a shame. What a shame. You digress.
Yeah.
Are we going to try to get that word into every episode?
digress?
Digress, because we do.
We're certainly getting that concept into every episode,
Well,
aren't we?
that's certainly true. That was fun. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that was very cool. Like you said, I mean, it's definitely not as booming as I would have thought. But
no, but
I don't know, there's something kind of creaky about it, something wooden about it.
That's a good way of putting it. Something very, I can hear a little bit of that Treebeard sort of thing going on.
Yeah.
A lot of
yeah.
Drop the jaw, and instead of doing a tight lip sort of it's more
Yeah.
Good stuff.
I'm glad you got to do those, not me.
Well, just wait. We're going to hear more from Treebeard. Spoiler alert.
Spoilers.
So that was fun.
All right.
But with that, why don't we go ahead and jump into the discussion? This is
Let's
an
do it.
interesting chapter. Like we said, we're just describing a map. So I'm going to dive in and start with not the little intro paragraph, but the second paragraph there. So, in the north of the world, Melkor had in the ages past reared Ered Engrin, the Iron Mountains, as a fence to his citadel of Autumno, and they stood upon the borders of the regions of everlasting cold, in a great curve from east to west. Behind the walls of Ered Engrin in the west, where they bent back northwards, Melkor built another fortress, as a defense against assault that might come from Valinor. And when he came back to Middle-earth, as has been told, he took up his abode in the endless dungeons of Angband, the Hells of Iron. For in the War of the Powers, the Valar, in their haste to overthrow him in his great stronghold of Autumno, did not wholly destroy Angband, nor search out all its deep places. Beneath Ered Engrin he made a great tunnel, which issued south of the mountains, and there he made a mighty gate. But above this gate, and behind it even to the mountains, he piled the thunderous towers of Thangorodrim, that were made of the ash and slag of his subterranean furnaces, and the vast refuse of his tunnelings. They were black and desolate and exceedingly lofty, and smoke issued from their tops, dark and foul upon the northern sky. Before the gates of Angband, filth and desolation spread southward for many miles over the wide plain of Ardgallan. But after the coming of the sun, rich grass arose there, and while Angband was besieged, and its gates shut, there were green things, even among the pits and broken rocks before the doors of hell.
That last sentence, I know we've talked about how dry this chapter is, but that last sentence is just so Tolkien, like just that hope.
Exactly.
I guess we'll get to that because I know there's a couple of things we want to talk about in that paragraph, but man, that's just so Tolkien right there.
It kind of makes me think of that line from Jurassic Park. Life finds a way.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
But yeah, it's that same concept. There's always hope.
It's true.
There's always something, kind of beautiful, even in the midst of this ugliness. Yeah.
It's
we
true.
see that
And
in all those places, whether it's the Dead Marshes. I think, well, let's see. I mean, I'm trying to think. I don't know that we see much in Mordor itself, but we do see moments of that. The water in the creeks and things like that. But
and don't we see, maybe not on the land in Mordor, but
that moment with Sam looking up at the stars,
up at the sky. Yeah, yeah, exactly. There's that stuff. There's really cool stuff in Ithilien as they're on their way to the pass of Cirith Ungol, which they're in the shadow of the Ephel-Duath, and they see that. They see the toppled king's head of the old Gondorian king. Yeah. There's a lot of those cool little moments about just the little bit of beauty that
in the midst of the darkness
shines through in the darkest places. Yeah.
Well, we've talked about that before, the light and dark and the contrast, and that certainly is a fitting example of that.
Yeah. But, and I think there's a bit of just even maybe the triumph of nature over corruption, not just hope. But,
that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. And I like, I don't know. I also there's a little concept here that I haven't really spent a whole lot of time thinking about, I have to admit. So we don't prepare that well. But there's an idea that shows up a lot in some old medieval legends and things. The idea that maybe the spirit of the realm, like sort of the health of the monarch of the realm, sort of affects the land itself.
Yeah.
The condition of the rulership sort of impacts the condition of the land, and we get that here. I think while Morgoth is in power,
while the gates
desolate,
are shut, it's There's
right.
yeah.
And
That's a
then we
good point.
see, after the coming of the sun, and then while Angband was besieged and the gates were shut, that's when the green started to grow. So it's when Morgoth was checked, that's when there's growth, and I think that's just a really neat concept.
It is. There's one other thing, and go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, and I also like the reminder of although this is a very descriptive chapter, there are a couple of neat little recaps in here, and this is one. We talked many episodes ago. Yeah, many episodes ago. I think we talked about how Angband was left over from the War of the Powers. The Valar destroyed Autumno, which was his first fortress, but they didn't completely clear out or fill up or raise Angband or whatever. Right. And so that's exactly where Morgoth went. So just a nice little reminder that that's where he was. And
that when you go to do a job, you should finish it.
Yeah. Don't fail to wholly destroy something in your haste to overthrow your enemy.
Exactly. Well, there's one other thing that kind of came to mind, because we've seen some things floating around the internets, the interwebs, of scale, showing massive dragons. I think the meme I'm referring to, where you've got Smaug is this tiny little dot, and Calagon is this monstrous continent-sized dragon. And it's because when he fell, the peaks of Thangorodrim were smote in his ruin or something along those lines. But let's look at the scale here.
Right. So people
and
are
we'll
thinking
get to that.
So people are thinking that he must be huge to crush these mountains.
Yeah. And then there's also things about how his wings blotted out the sun. I think there's a line someplace that might not be in the Silmarillion, but I think that's in some other text. But even so, of course, my hand can blot out the sun if it's in the right spot.
If you hold it close enough to your eyes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I'm not sure that's particularly relevant. But the idea of scale, I kind of wanted to get an idea of this, because the peaks of Thangorodrim are not mountains. They're built of ash and slag and the refuse of his tunnelings, dirt, loose dirt that has been dug up. So these, how tall can they really be? There's no support to these. There's no structure, no dense rock. They're not a mountain. They are a pile of junk. They're a
pile of trash,
right, a pile of ash and slag and dirt. So, they are still tall, right? I mean, they're described as exceedingly lofty, but these are simply to kind of protect the spot where the tunnel comes out. So he's got a tunnel that goes underneath the mountains. He must use those really cool worms from the Battle of the Five Armies, or not.
And you bring those in.
Somebody watched Dune too many times.
Don't make me go into another Dune reference this episode.
Seriously, that they were digging for spice.
For he is the Kwisatz Haderach.
There we go. We brought the Kwisatz
there's your voice.
in.
There's your voiceless velar fricative. Your Haderach. Sorry.
Oh man, no, that's brilliant stuff. But yeah, so these are these are towers, not mountains, and they're placed above a gate that is where the tunnel comes out. So the tunnel comes out,
right,
and there's a gate where the tunnel comes out, and then above the gate are these towers that back up to the mountains. So I don't think they're as tall as people think they are.
That's a good point, because it's so again. It's what he dug out when he was building this fortress underground. So it's enough material to
not
fill.
Not the fortress, just the
just the tunnels.
Just the tunnels. Yeah, the ash and slag, and then the refuse of his tunneling. So he dug this tunnel underneath the mountains.
So there you go. So it's not even there's enough material to fill a fortress. It's
just the tunnel. No, probably a pretty big tunnel, because it goes under a mountain range.
Right.
But it's you couldn't stack that stuff on top of itself and make it actually 20,000 feet high, for instance. It would collapse under its own weight. Because it's not a mountain. But anyway, I just thought that was interesting. And this is really the best description we get of Thangorodrim, don't we?
It is. It is. And it's interesting not only for scale, but it's also interesting when you think of Melkor or Morgoth as, contrasted with somebody like Aule, the Vala who actually creates mountains.
Right, right.
And, Morgoth...
He just creates a mockery of a mountain, doesn't he?
Exactly. He shouldn't be able to create a mountain. He can create a mockery of one. You can create a pile of trash and slag that is sort of mountain-shaped, but not a real mountain.
Eyes, if you squint a little, it kind of looks like a mountain.
from far away. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
And they do smoke.
They do, yeah.
but it's because they're made out of burning slag and
burning slag and ash. You know, I mean, it's yeah,
very interesting.
Yeah, I just thought that was worth discussing because, like I said, we're not going to get another chance to see the detail of Thangorodrim. So
right.
But next now that we've dealt with the bad guy, now we get the good guys, and it might help you if you think of it this way. We started with Morgoth. We're going to go to Fingolfin's line next. Then we'll go to Finarfin's line, and then we'll wrap up with Feanor's line. So, we'll also have some Sindar in there and some others, but
yeah,
that'll help you, I think, listeners, as you kind of work your way through this chapter to think of them in family groupings like that. So,
yeah, it is nicely arranged that way, isn't it?
It is, and I didn't realize that until I started to outline it. I was like, wait a minute. Oh, okay, I see this. So, Shawn, why don't you go ahead and take that next paragraph for us?
I will, and before I do, I'm actually going to say a quick reminder. It's going to be very, very beneficial to pull up loaderproject.com here.
I'm so sorry I didn't mention that. Yeah, that's really almost a requirement for this one, isn't it?
For this chapter, more so even than the last few that we mentioned it. Yeah,
really
and
true.
there are some maps in the book. Of course, there's one in the back. There's also a map in this chapter itself that actually does kind of have names of the different chieftains in their different kingdoms. But I don't know, Loader Project. I've gotten so used to it. I really like that one. So
well, it's such a clear map, and it makes things a lot easier to I agree.
Yeah, it's really good. And so now I bring it up now because we're actually on the map now because Thangorodrim wasn't on the map. So
that is correct. Yeah. The rest of this is all on the map. So lotrproject.com, click on maps in the upper left, click on map of Beleriand in the upper right, and that takes you to our map.
Yep.
So
cool.
While we're looking at that, while I'm looking at that, I'll let you read the next paragraph.
All right. To the west of Thangorodrim lay Hisilome, the land of mist, for so it was named by the Noldor in their own tongue, because of the clouds that Morgoth sent thither during their first encampment. Hithlum it became, in the tongue of the Sindar that dwelt in those regions. It was a fair land while the siege of Angband lasted, although its air was cool and winter there was cold. In the west it was bounded by Ered Lomin, the echoing mountains that marched near the sea, and in the east and south by the great curve of Ered Wethrin, the shadowy mountains that looked across Ard Galan and the Vale of Sirion.
Okay. So if we're on the map, you can see out there it is very far north.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
almost as far north as Thangorodrim would be. I mean, if you look, really, it's due east is where Anfalgalith or Ard Galan is, and Ard Galan is the plain in front of Thangorodrim. So,
right. Thangorodrim would be just above Anfalgalith.
Just above that, somewhere off the top of the map. So we are almost as far north. And also, if you think about, if you recall that the Lammoth was where, which is just to the west, is where Morgoth and Ungoliant fought when they first came back to Middle Earth, and just
at the end of their
northwest
first date.
It didn't end well.
No, Blackheart.
She's not calling him.
Still, call me baby.
She's not calling him again. I was going to say she's not calling him for sure. Oh man, she's giving him the hand with both hands. So like just northwest of that is the Helcaraxe.
Right. So we're talking very
that's cold. Yeah.
This is going to be like northern Canada cold.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, well, I'd have to look at some globes to get an idea of actual latitude.
Of actual latitudes?
Yeah, latitude. Yeah. But if I remember correctly, the Shire is supposed to be at about England's line of latitude. And there are maps that exist. This is not one of them, but there are maps that blend that show kind of how Middle Earth and Beleriand blended there at the Ered Lindon. And if those are to be believed, the Shire, the same latitude would be like Nargothrond and southern Doriath and near the Falls of Sirion. If that's the case,
that's a good comparison.
Hithlum is very far north.
Good bit north, yeah.
You know, Sweden, Norway kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So definitely cold.
Interesting comparison. That's cool. I didn't think about that. And then I think this is so we talked about the Lammoth and the Helcaraxe. I also wanted to point out that this is where the Noldor first encamped when they came back to Middle Earth.
Oh yeah, that's right. That awkward family reunion on the shores of Lake Mithrim.
Yeah, exactly. And And as we'll see,
Yes.
some of the Noldor actually stayed there. They
Yes,
camped
they
out
did.
there and they never left.
And they never left. And I'm going to go ahead and take that next one then. So Fingolfin and Fingon, his son, held Hithlum, and the most part of Fingolfin's folk dwelt in Mithrim, about the shores of the Great Lake. To Fingon was assigned Dorlomin, that lay to the west of the mountains of Mithrim. But their chief fortress was at Ithel-Sirion, in the east of Ered-Wethrin, whence they kept watch upon Ardgallan, and their cavalry rode upon that plain even to the shadow of Thangorodrim. For from few their horses had increased swiftly, and the grass of Ardgallan was rich and green. Of those horses many of the sires came from Valinor, and they were given to Fingolfin by Maedhros in atonement of his losses, for they had been carried by ship to Lothscar. So I'm just going to ding Feanor one more time.
I was going to say, that's kind of cool, but also kind of not cool.
He had room for freaking horses on the boats, but not for any of his kindred.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Stop for a moment to let that sink in.
Seriously, you left me on the shores of Aman, but you took your horses.
Yeah.
Don't talk to me about not having enough room.
You know what? Yeah. No, he prizes, prizes tools above people. I mean,
he needed a cavalry to take on.
I don't think this is out of love for horse. I don't think he loved horses so much. He wanted them because he needed them for his fight.
Right, exactly. He needed a cavalry.
So, he needed them as weapons, cavalry, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's cool. Good on Maedhros for atoning, and we see in a few places that Maedhros's his atonement that we saw in the previous chapter.
Right.
It's the real deal. It's not just words the way it was with some of his brothers.
That's true. I mean, repentance. This is an act in keeping of repentance, or and it's consistent with that. So, definitely, like you said, good on Maedhros. Very good. Mm-hmm. I thought it was interesting that they had the land. So if we're looking at the map there, Dorlomin is kind of at the south central area of Hithlum, whereas Mithrim is further to the east. So So even though Fingon had Dorlomin, his chief fortress was Ithel-Sirion on the other side of Mithrim. So they weren't really, they had to go through, Dad's land to get back to Fingon's land in Dorlomin.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. I wasn't. Yeah, I didn't pick up on the fact that was actually Fingon's fortress, but it.
Yeah,
maybe it was,
Well, you're right. It's their chief fortress. That's a good point. That could be either one. I guess I was thinking of it being Fingon because that was who was mentioned in the previous sentence.
Yeah,
but you're right. It's their chief fortress, so that could be, associated with both.
It could be just the family,
right?
In general, but it's hard to say.
No, I think that makes more sense. I mean, certainly, crew from both Fingolfin and Fingon's people would be, manning that fortress. But yeah, I think that makes much more sense. That's much more logical. Otherwise, Fingolfin doesn't have a fortress. It's
right,
just Fingon's.
Right.
No, that's not good.
Yeah, exactly. As High King of the Noldor, as we're going to see, he probably needs a castle.
He kind of does.
But it's interesting though, because this is the area of the map that to me never really quite materializes in my mind as a real place. As I read the later story, I get a really clear picture of Nargothrond and Doriath and and
so much action happens in those places, right?
Yeah, exactly. We see so much, and despite the fact that you look, I guess Turin is very closely associated with Dorlomin, but I don't know, for some reason it just never really. I just don't really feel like I know that place as well, and so I think to me, I always kind of feel like Dorlomin and Mithrim are kind of run together a little bit. I always get the sense, and maybe this is just me, kind of adding this to it, but I always get the sense that Fingolfin and Fingon sort of really ruled sort of side by side, ruled in, kind of sort of a nebulous single realm almost. But I don't know. I might be reading too much into that, but also interesting is the idea that Ithel-Sirion is right there on the other side of the mountains.
Yeah.
Looking down on the plain of Ardgallan and beyond to Thangorodrim.
Wow. I mean, that's really as close as they get. I mean, we look at the other lands. We look at Dorthonion, where we'll find some other Noldor there later. And then, of course, over on the far east, the March of Maedhros and, Feanor's sons over in that region. But this one is right up there, I mean, it's close. We'll see it. We'll see it come into play later in one of the big battles.
That's right. Yeah.
Really unfortunate things that happen.
Yeah.
But
it reminds me a bit of Minas Ithil in the I guess right at the end of the Second Age, beginning of the Third Age.
Right.
Which later became Minas Morgul, but that was the Gondorians built that right there on the mountains for the same reason, to keep watch over Sauron's land of Mordor after they had deposed him.
Exactly. It was
Very interesting.
Fortress of Gondor was, it does definitely remind me of that. No question about it. Clearly, they're ready to fight. I mean, they're right there, and they want to be as close to the battlefront as possible. But that makes sense given who we're talking about. We're talking about Fingon the Valiant and Fingolfin, who's the steadfast one.
That's right. Yeah.
So it really fits their personality.
It really does, and the fact that they just got to Lake Mithrim and they just stayed there. Like, I'm here to fight. This is a good place. I'm going to fight right here.
Yep.
They didn't seek out anything else, which is really neat.
That's a very good point. Well, I think you've got the next one. You're going to take us on to a little bit further west to the realm of Nevrast.
Yep. All right. So next paragraph here. West of Dorloman, beyond the echoing mountains, which south of the Firth of Drengist marched inland, lay Nevrast, that signifies the hither shore in the Sindarin tongue. That name was given at first to all the coastlands south of the Firth, but afterwards only to the land whose shores lay between Drengist and Mount Taras. There for many years was the realm of Turgon the Wise, son of Fingolfin, bounded by the sea and by Ered Loman, and by the hills which continued the walls of Ered Wethrin westward from Ivrin to Mount Taras, which stood upon a promontory. By some, Nevrast was held to belong rather to Beleriand than to Hithlum, for it was a milder land, watered by the wet winds from the sea, and sheltered from the cold north winds that blew over Hithlum. It was a hollow land, surrounded by mountains and great coast cliffs higher than the plains behind, and no river flowed thence. And there was a great mere in the midst of Nevrast, with no certain shores, being encircled by wide marshes. Lyn Iwen was the name of that mere, because of the multitude of birds that dwelt there, of such as love tall reeds and shallow pools. At the coming of the Noldor, many of the Grey Elves lived in Nevrast near to the coast, and especially about Mount Taras in the southwest, for to that place Ulmo and Ase had been wont to come in days of old. All that people took Turgon for their lord, and the mingling of the Noldor and the Sindar came to pass soonest there, and Turgon dwelt long in those halls that he named Vinyamar, under Mount Taras beside the sea.
Oh, and we'll see Vinyamar again, won't we?
Oh, yes, we will.
Such a moment.
Yes, we will. Yeah, it'll be a while, but such a beautiful moment.
I just can't get that out of my head. But I'm thinking of the fuller story, the fuller version of the story from
the version that's in Unfinished Tales.
I can't wait to get to. Amazing.
I love this part.
Yeah. The mingling of the people came to pass soonest there. The Grey Elves living there already. And they just accept Turgon.
Yeah, I love that. I always kind of had a sense of Turgon strikes me as a real people's ruler. Beloved by his people. I don't mean that he was a communist.
Welcome to the Democratic People's Republic of Nevrast. Meet our dear leader, Turgon. All we need is the Red Book of Turgon now.
Yeah, exactly. The red Book of Turgon. Oh, that's Turgon. That's great. Oh man,
folks, we just have to try to add humor. This is reading a map. I mean, it's got
a star on it, but the star is his grandson.
Oh, man. Oh, too good. Oh, man. Oh wow, yes indeed. Well played.
Couldn't pass up that.
Yeah, no, I see what you mean, though. I mean, he is certainly the wise, and I think there's a certain understanding on his part that shows in his dealings with with the Sindar, and so no, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, I think certainly Feanor's sons thought themselves well above the Sindar.
Yeah,
and,
definitely.
Turgon does seem like a little bit more. Down to earth, I guess is the way to put it.
Yeah, I always feel that way. He's practical, but he's I don't know. He strikes me as an approachable ruler.
Well, until he goes and hides in the mountains and doesn't let anybody come see him.
I mean, to his people, though.
Not very approachable.
It's true.
He's got to climb through a hole in the mountains and then go up through 7 gates, all stacked with a bunch of elves with bows and arrows.
So true.
Approachable.
Allow me to rephrase that. He seems very approachable to his people. I don't know
There
why.
we go. That's fair.
Certainly not to Finrod or Fingon or anybody else.
Tell Hurin that he's
Where's
approachable.
Gondolin? Where's Gondolin?
Tell Hurin. Turgon's
exactly.
approachable.
Oh, man. But, I really do think of him. He's beloved by his people. I always get that sense. He had
really
to
is.
be to do what he did with, sadly, we don't see Gondolin in this chapter, but what he ends up doing with this kingdom where he basically says, okay, everybody, let's move into this valley and nobody's leaving.
That's right. Total isolation.
And they do it for,
love of him.
Yeah, exactly.
For a very long time.
Yeah.
I don't
and
have
for
that
protection,
number off the top of my head. Well, yeah, certainly.
No. So, but yeah, here he's not there yet. Gondolin is on the horizon. I think we'll see it in one or two chapters here.
Yeah.
But right now he's at Vinyamar, which is his old home.
Yeah, and right there, right near the coast. Beautiful location. Still pretty chilly, but nowhere near as cold as Hithlum. And like they said, to some it would belong to Beleriand. Though I think
that's a good distinction. I have a bad habit of referring to all of this area as Beleriand, but the truth is that Beleriand is the part that's not Hithlum. Yeah. Hithlum is actually considered a separate region, and Beleriand is more the.
Well, and I think even Lothlan is a separate region, and of course Anfagloth. I think Beleriand is basically from the line of the Arid Wethrin when it from like Tolkien there. Yeah. And west along the line of the Arid Wethrin, that's one borderline, and the other borderline is the north end of Dorthonion,
right?
And then across the March of Mithros,
right? You're right.
The eastern border being the Arid Lindon,
with the Arid Luin, yeah, exactly, yeah. So that's a good, really important distinction if you want to be very accurate in how you're referring.
If you want to be
places,
especially precise.
Yeah, exactly.
But
So where do we go from there?
Where do we go from there? Well, we decided we're not going to read every single chapter, so we're just going to kind of talk about the next couple, because otherwise we're going to be here all night reading a map. So we'll just we'll talk briefly about what goes on there in Dorthonion. We know that it's described here as being 60 leagues from west to east. That's about 180 miles. Coniferous trees, great pine forest that it bore, especially on the north and western sides. So it rose up, and I love this line, where lay many tarns at the feet of bare tors, whose heads were higher than the peaks of Arid Wethrin.
I had to look up two words in that sentence.
First time I read that, I just, okay.
What?
The tarns and tors. Tell us about tarns and tors.
Yeah, so a tarn is a mountain lake, and that is a term that I understand is pretty common in the uplands of northern England.
Okay.
So it's a lake at the foot of a mountain, and tor is simply a hill or a rocky peak. So that's sort of the mountain in question. So imagine tarns at the feet of bare tors. Imagine these sort of like highland lakes at the foot of rocky, probably not big mountains. I think they're more like rocky hills. Yeah.
But bare. They're not covered in trees at that point.
Right, exactly. I mean, if you've ever seen pictures of the Scottish Highlands, or if you've ever had the good fortune to go to the Scottish Highlands, which I'm happy to say I did once, that's kind of how I imagine this.
I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah,
climate-wise, that makes sense. It's the same, the same kind of latitude, and you got that same geography going on with the with the Highlands going, and the tarns and the tors. I love that.
Yeah, tarns and tors. That's like the bit in the Minas Tirith chapter of Return of the King.
The farm stuff. You know what I'm talking about, the Pelennor Fields.
Oast and Garner, Fold and Byre, I think it is.
Fold and Byre, yeah.
I love that.
Had to look those up, too. Well, no shame in that, folks. No shame in having a dictionary handy.
Not when reading Tolkien at all.
Absolutely. I mean, the ebook's kind of handy because you can usually look it up from there, but sometimes the definitions aren't there. You just got
a lot, you got to look up in a real
dictionary.
Yeah.
So now this is Dorthonion, and it's hard to. Do you see it as sometimes?
We talked about this, and I'm sorry, I probably have ruined it for you. It's hard for me to see it and not see Darth Onion. I'm sorry.
Onion.
I'm sorry to put that out there in the universe.
I'm sorry, too. What is it? The Star Wars niche satire site.
Oh, yeah.
Like the Onion.
It's like the dark side Onion. It's the Onion for Sith Lords.
This is bad. This is really bad.
Why do we do this? These
don't know,
bad geographical puns.
It's like we had a listener post a picture of Tyrion upon Tuna last week.
Right, with Tyrion Lannister from Game of Thrones. Yeah.
Oh, that's too much crossover. Man.
Yeah.
Worlds collide.
Well, with Tyrion upon Tuna and Darth Onion, maybe we could make a pretty good sandwich.
Oh. Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for my co-host. I will be accepting applications.
And if the sandwich doesn't taste good, we'll just all say Fui Nienna.
Oh, my goodness.
I'm done. I'm done. I told you. It's been a rough week for me.
He'll be here all night. Don't forget to tip your waitress. Now, Darth Onion is held by Angron and Aignor. These are Finarfin's sons. But they're holding it as vassals of their brother Finrod. So he's the Lord of Nargothrond, which we'll get to, but map-wise, it's way to the south. So they're holding this land as a vassal property.
Right.
So really, Finrod's in charge, but they're holding it for him. It's always nice to set up your vassals closer to your enemies. So, which is
yes,
pretty much what they are. But here's the thing: even though they're very close to Ardgallan, they're not likely to be attacked because the south end of that plateau ends in some steep cliffs and drop-offs that really wouldn't be suitable for an army trying to invade Beleriand. Like we talked about before.
You can see Morgoth's army just taking over that area and like, okay, what do we do now?
Now what? We've talked about this before when we talked about the battles that came earlier, how the orcs came down through the Vale of Sirion and then again through the March of Maedhros. I think that line that we did last week was that they weren't sleeping, remember, and that those two sides attacked and wiped out the force of the orcs. So really, Angron and Aignor are close, but they don't have to worry too much about being attacked, is what it seems. Mm-hmm. We do get a little bit of description of that of the Pass of Sirion. If you look to the west of Dorthonion, you'll see the Fen of Serek, and then you'll see the river Sirion going through the mountains there. That is the Pass of Sirion, and it's held by Finrod. And in the middle of the river, there's an island called Tol Sirion, and Finrod built a mighty watchtower called Minas Tirith. Mm-hmm. Really, where have I heard that name before, right?
I know, it sounds so familiar.
Tower of Watch or Tower of Guard. So now you know that the men of Gondor can't name anything originally. Didn't we just find out recently that Denethor was the king of the Elves in Osirian?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. They can't. They can't come up with anything original.
It's all been done before. But Finrod technically controlled that, but then he committed that fortress to Orodreth, his brother, after he made Nargothrond and went to the south. So there's that.
And that is really, really hard to see on the map, but it's...
you have to zoom in pretty far. There's
a little red dot there.
If you have it on the default settings with the red dot showing, you'll see a dot on Tol Sirion right there. If you zoom in at the maximum level, you'll spot it. Very strategic location, clearly. Very strategic location.
And if you click on the red dot, you'll see the date of Minas Tirith's construction and also a spoiler about what happens to it. So,
oops. Yeah. We won't talk about that.
No, we won't.
We won't tell people to click on anything anymore. Don't click the red button.
Do not.
Don't touch the red button.
Stay away from the red dot.
Okay, so...
oh, man.
Do we have anything else to say on either? I don't think we do, right? We're moving on then?
I think you got it on that one. So the next passage is yours.
Well, and this is kind of a long one, not because of the passage I'm reading, but because of what I want to add to it. But we're gonna start with the passage itself.
Oh, all right. I suppose I'll allow it.
Okay. Well, you'll be able to pipe in anytime you want. Now, the great and fair country of Beleriand lay on either side of the mighty river Sirion, renowned in song, which rose at Ithel Sirion and skirted the edge of Ardgallan ere he plunged through the pass, becoming ever fuller with the streams of the mountains. Thence he flowed south for 130 leagues. Now that's, what do we figure, just about 400 miles? So
I think so.
Pretty lengthy, it's a pretty big river. gathering the waters of many tributaries, until with a mighty flood he reached his many mouths and sandy delta in the Bay of Balar. And following Sirion from north to south, there lay upon the right hand in West Beleriand the forest of Brethil between Sirion and Teiglin, and then the realm of Nargothrond between Teiglin and Narog. And the river Narog rose in the falls of Ivren in the southern face of Dorloman, and flowed some 80 leagues ere he joined Sirion in Nantathran, the land of willows. South of Nantathran was a region of meads filled with many flowers, where few folk dwelt. And beyond lay the marshes and isles of reed about the mouths of Sirion, and the sands of his delta, empty of all living things save birds of the sea. Really cool, beautiful
cool
description.
Yeah,
and it reminded
yeah. This is
me.
the one. This is the one. One of a couple paragraphs in this chapter that's really more about the land itself,
Isn't it? Yeah.
than about the kingdoms. And
Yeah.
because there's really not a kingdom here that we're talking about. We're just talking
No.
about the land and the country, and you really see Tolkien's.
I mean, you do get to see that Nargothrond is technically, it's part of the
True.
realm of
That's
Nargothrond.
true, yeah.
But there's not
Well, that's
much
true, yeah.
there. People aren't.
not much about the land itself, about Nargothrond itself. Yeah.
Right,
Or
exactly.
who rules there.
It's definitely
But it's
about
just
the land.
Tolkien's. Yeah, and Tolkien's got such a gift for describing nature in such beautiful terms. It's
He
amazing
really
stuff.
does. The land of willows. I mean, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
But it reminded me of something because,
Yeah.
well, it reminded me of Fangorn. Because he talks about it. I love this because, of course, we've talked about all those moments in Lord of the Rings where first age stuff is referenced and you wouldn't know it. Because, of course,
Right.
at the time of its publication, there was no first age that was readable.
Right,
We
right.
talked about, when Theoden was compared to Orome.
To Orome,
in the
yeah.
writing of the Battle of the Pelennor Fields.
Yeah.
Well, there's a
Or
really...
even just all the references to Turin and Baron and Luthien and all that stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. All stuff that's just kind of in the background that you don't know about until you get a chance to read this, and which is why I'm so grateful this was eventually published. But it reminded me of that great poem or great chant that Fangorn told to Merry and Pippin about this whole region, and I want to go ahead and bravely try to read that.
This is going to be our first long form poetry reading on the podcast, isn't it?
Well, it's not really going to be poetry. It's fortunately more of a chant, but we'll get to that first. We'll get to that later. First, I want to pick up in the middle of the read.
All right.
So this is from, he's talking to Merry and Pippin, and he says, "Time was when I could walk and sing all day and hear no more than the echo of my own voice in the hollow hills. The woods were like the woods of Lothlorien, only thicker, stronger, younger. And the smell of the air. I used to spend a week just breathing." Treebeard fell silent, striding along and yet making hardly a sound with his great feet. Then he began to hum again and passed into a murmuring chant. Gradually the hobbits became aware that he was chanting to them. "In the willow meads of Tasaranen I walked in the spring. Ah, the sight and the smell of the spring in Non-Tasarion. And I said that was good. I wandered in summer in the elm woods of Osiriand, and the light and the music in the summer by the 7 rivers of Osir, and I thought that was best. To the beaches of Neldoreth I came in the autumn. Ah, the gold and the red and the sighing of leaves in the autumn in Tower na Neldor. It was more than my desire. To the pine trees upon the highland of Dorthonion I climbed in the winter. Ah, the wind and the whiteness and the black branches of winter upon Orad Nathon. My voice went up and sang in the sky. And now all those lands lie under the wave, and I walk in Amberona, in Tauramorna, in Aldalome, in my own land, in the country of Fangorn, where the roots are long, and the years lie thicker than the leaves in Tauramornalome." He ended, and strode on silently, and in all the wood, as far as ear could reach, there was not a sound. Deep breath.
That's a beautiful, beautiful chant, poem, whatever you want to call
Isn't
it.
Isn't it? I love the words. It's what I loved about it is that it's a cool overview of the geography of all of this, of all of Beleriand.
Yeah, it really is.
We get kind of a piecemeal bit of each of these places. We get in the spring, he's in Tasaranen, or Nan Tasarian, as he puts it. That's Quenya for Nan Tathrin. So you can see that, right? Nan Tasarian.
Oh, yeah,
Nan Tathrin.
Definitely.
It means Willow Vale. So he's referring to the woods of Nan Tathrin there, south of Nargothrond, right there bordering Sirion, where the river Narog joins it. So it's way far in the south. And then we have summer in Osirion to the east. And then Neldoreth in the autumn, which is pretty much in the middle, right there in Doriath. And then finally in the winter, where it's coldest, and that's interesting. Most people winter in the south and summer in the north. He winters in the north, where it was coldest.
He wants a little,
Yeah,
I don't know.
He wants to go skiing, I guess. I don't know.
Maybe so, yeah.
But Ora Nathon is Mount of the Pine Trees. I wanted you to know I looked that up because you're not the only word nerd around here. You always get the cool
Very
words.
Well done. I know. I selfishly take.
Oh, no.
Cool
I let you take them because I don't want to be wrong. But I do have one more. When he speaks of Tauramorna or Tauramorna Lome, he is referring, of course, to Fangorn, but he's calling it by either Black Forest or Black Forest under Twilight. And we know those words, right? I mean, the tower is a forest. T-A-U-R,
forest
is the woods of the forest. And Lome, I know we've seen that as a word meaning twilight.
Twilight, yeah.
I think Morna was
Mor.
Mor is black.
It's black,
Mordor, Morgoth. So Tauramorna is
Tauramorna
Black Forest,
Lome.
and Tauramorna Lome, which is a beautiful word. It just rolls off the tongue.
It does.
Absolutely love that.
You know what I love so much about that one, especially Tauramorna Lome. It's you see every single element of the word, and it feels like an earlier, a more ancient, a more I don't know, just a more ancient, I guess, form of Quenya. I mean, because these are Quenya roots.
Yeah, they are. They're all
But they're
like we saw him refer to Nan Tathrin as Nan Tasarion, which is the Quenyan version.
Quenya form of that.
He's referring to very, like you said, he's using the ancient words. He's using the old words.
Before the language has has just sort of mutated over time, and there's just a tendency for languages to get easier to speak. Sounds that sound kind of alike tend to kind of blend into one another. You lose a lot of connecting consonants and things like that over time. But you get the idea that Treebeard doesn't do that. He still speaks Quenya the way he learned to speak Quenya a long time ago.
That's how Ents are.
Yeah, exactly. And why would they try to hurry through the word when everything about Entish speech is, it's we don't bother saying anything unless it's worth taking a long time to say.
Oh, I love that. That's so beautiful.
That's just so cool.
That really is.
And the other thing I picked up on when you were reading this was the imagery of the seasons, just the progression through the seasons, how beautiful that is. And it reminds me of, I'm going to admit, while you were reading, I was looking for this and I didn't find it yet, but there's that poem in the Book of Lost Tales. Mm-hmm. That is.
I won't be able to look for that here. That's upstairs.
I don't have it here, but there's a poem about seasons in that, and maybe
we'll have to look that up.
I'm not going to say more because I don't have it in front of me, but there is a poem. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that. Tolkien, I think, has played with this idea of a poem that kind of takes you through the seasons. And I'll find it and I'll save face when we post this up.
It kind of reminds me also of that moment when the three companions talk about Boromir and they talk about the south
different
wind
winds,
and the north wind and the west wind, but then they don't talk about the east wind.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's that same kind of thing. There's these four, it's a cycle of four, and each one has a very different feel, a different mood. Yeah. But you mentioned Book of Lost Tales. There's something else that I was looking at in there. In the Fall of Gondolin about the Land of Willows, there's Nantathrin in particular that triggered all of this, was that Tuor ended up in the Land of Willows near the end of spring. And here's just a little tidbit for y'all. Here saw he the first butterflies and was glad of the sight. And it is said that all butterflies and their kindred were born in the valley of the Land of Willows. So there you go. Butterflies. Wow. Who knew?
That's very cool. Butterflies.
And there you have it. There's the highlight of the episode right there. Butterflies.
We have found butterflies.
Well,
very cool.
They show up again in The Hobbit. The big ones at the top of Mirkwood.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
The Black Monarchs.
That's right. Wow, I would not have remembered that. I don't know anything about butterflies.
I know very little. I mean, I do live in California, and I once went to somewhere up the coast, Monterey area, where the monarchs are supposed to have this big migration, and I think we saw like 6 of them. We must have missed the season. It was like, I hope I'm not paying for this because there aren't any.
That wah-wah moment. Yep.
Yeah. So then why don't we go and have you take the next paragraph and tell us a little bit more about Nargothrond?
Yeah, so we saw a little bit in the last paragraph about how Nargothrond extended east between the river Teglin and Narog, but then here we see that it actually extended pretty far west, all the way to the river Nenning, which, if we look at our map, is...
Oh, wow, that is pretty far over there.
Yeah. So it's... Yeah, wow. If you look basically where the Falas is, the river Nenning is what separates the Falas from West Beleriand.
Right.
That sort of rises out of those mountains, that little cluster of mountains, and runs down to the coast of Eglarest. Yeah, exactly. And so we know that Eglarest was where Círdan was, ruling over the Falathrim. But this was interesting that Círdan and Finrod made friendship and alliance. It says, that not only were they friends and allies, but that with the aid of the Noldor, the havens of Brithambar and Eglarest were actually built anew. So there's a lot of teamwork, between the different kindreds of the elves, and I really like this. I think that's very cool that we see that. I think Finrod was another one who's kind of a people's ruler and
very honorable.
Yeah. Definitely.
Well, now we're in a different line, right? He's part of Finarfin's line, and we know that Finarfin was, if Feanor was the fiery guy who is best at fighting and killing people and making things, and Fingolfin was steadfast and trustworthy. Finarfin was wise and certainly demonstrated that sort of, I'm thinking just in the fact that he married a Vanya, so his kids were, a blend of the races. Of
Noldo and Vanya, yeah.
Right. So, yeah, anyway, I just see that as being something that we see echoed in Finrod. Because, you realize later on, Finrod ends up being, a friend of men. So it's not surprising here that he's also... friends with the Sindar.
Yeah, it's just a really cool moment. And also worth noting, I don't remember if we've mentioned this yet, but these Falathrim, who lived here at Eglarest, were actually would later be the folks who lived and worked at the Grey Havens.
That's right. Age. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So that's pretty cool. I think it's here. I'm actually looking for the part where we get into the rivers. And the way the rivers are referred to in here.
It was mentioned a little bit in the paragraph that I read where Sirion became ever fuller. Thence he flowed south, and then later...
Yeah, there you go.
Until with a mighty flood he reached his many mouths. I was going to ask you about that because you're a language guy. Why are the rivers referred to as he?
This was an interesting one. I think we talked about this briefly in our last episode, and so I spent some time looking into it. Yeah, he does that all over. I mean, it's the Sirion, the Narog,
they're all
the Gelion later on. They're all he. And the short answer is, I'm not sure I know, but I can tell you a little bit about
helpful.
what I. Yeah, I know. I can tell you a little bit about what I did find. the first thing I thought was that it might be sort of a Maya of the river. Like the way we see that the moon is he and the sun is she because of the Maiar that are associated with them.
Right.
But I looked into it and I couldn't find
even that though, weren't the two trees referred to as
the two trees were referred to
before the moon.
That's true. That is true. So yeah, I mean, probably not. It's true. That's a chicken and egg thing, isn't it?
It is. You're right.
Really, it was the trees first. And I couldn't really find where any Maya of any river was ever named anyway. So I couldn't see that, that there was a tendency for, I don't know, male Maiar to be rivers or something like that. The only character I could think of who might be a Maya of a river, and this is by no means, fully supported, but Goldberry. Goldberry is the river daughter of the river Withywindle. Of course, she's female, so even if she is a Maya, that's not really going to help us.
No, that pretty much negates your theory, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So let's forget about that one. I actually thought about something else, just kind of going into some supreme word nerddom here. I thought that maybe it would be either something that Tolkien picked up from medieval poetry. Maybe Chaucer or Old English poets or somebody might have had a habit of referring to rivers as he.
Did we find any evidence of that? Because I'm not familiar enough. I mean, I don't remember anything in Chaucer, but
not that I found. Okay. Though, granted, that's a really hard thing to research.
Small sample size.
So, yeah. Well, yeah, that too, and I didn't have enough time to word search a whole bunch of poetry enough to fully satisfy myself here.
Well, especially when you're trying to look for a pronoun like he or him, you can't. You can't search
in Old
for
English,
that.
which is a language that I can kind of read a little bit of when I know what I'm reading already.
Better than me.
I don't know. I might be overestimating my abilities with Old English, but so that really didn't. I didn't really find any evidence of that. But then I thought maybe it's just a simple question of grammatical gender.
Oh yeah,
like the word for river being a masculine noun in like Old English or something. Because I mean, a lot of people may not know, but obviously, we don't have grammatical gender in English today, but Old English did.
Right. Well, as do the Germanic languages now.
Right, that's true. Yeah, and many others. Romance languages, and
that's
so forth.
True.
Not Finnish, interestingly, which is something I came across. And also not Quenya and Sindarin.
No, we knew that.
Which is interesting. Yeah. So anyway, I did do a little looking into some Old English words for river to see if, they were masculine. Couldn't find a ton on my own. I actually reached out to one of our listeners. Some folks, people who remember the incredible Do Balrogs Have Wings essay.
Yes.
A few months back, remember our listener Tom H., who's he's actually got a blog where he publishes a lot of really great essays. He does a ton of research on some of Tolkien's medieval influences.
Oh, wow. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, he's done some comparisons to, just pulling out images from medieval poems and Old English and stuff like that. And so I thought this is something that maybe Tom could help me with.
It sounds right up his alley.
Yeah, it really did. And by the way, his blog is at alasnotme.blogspot.com, which is an Eowyn quote, in case anyone is forgetting that one.
That sounds familiar, yeah.
But so yeah, I'll put up a link to that too. So we'll have links to a couple of cool blogs up there. But he actually helped me track this down, and we did find out that there is one Old English word, stream. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Stream, which is basically stream. It's the word that became stream. That actually is a masculine gender noun.
Huh. Okay.
So that's kind of the most promising lead we've got on that. But it's
what about river?
Yeah, I could not find a word that looked like river. I think river is actually a Latin root word.
Oh, yeah,
so,
that makes sense.
So there's no native Germanic word that looks just like it. Okay. I did find a couple of other words that were feminine that meant water or river. So that's
not helpful.
Not helpful at all. So,
we're back where we started. We don't have an answer.
Stream is the best thing I can come up with here. And you know what? Sorry, Alan. I looked. I tried.
I'm so sorry. Well, the only thing I could think of was if it had anything to do with the Valar in charge of the waters being a male, right? Ulmo's in charge of the waters. But I can't.
That's true.
But I couldn't think, are the domains of any of the female Valar, which I guess if I'm being technical, I should say the Valier, Are the domains
fancy.
of any of the Valley are referred to with feminine pronouns? Like, are the stars, made by Varda, are they referred to as she? Are any of the trees or forests referred to as her or she, since they're under Yavanna? I don't know.
I can't think of any.
The mountains do seem to be referred to as he's. At least we know that
do they?
Karathras is referred to as a he when the storms come and the Fellowship's trying to get over.
That's a good catch. Okay.
I remember that being referred to as a he, I think. But I don't remember anything being referred to as she's.
I think the stars are pretty much always referred to in the plural.
Yeah. And the only gender association I can think of at all has to do not with the stars, but with the constellation, with Manel-Makar. But
right,
where
Manel-Makar with his shining belt. Yeah.
Right, that's the only gender thing I can come up with from that, but not the stars themselves. Interesting. Yeah. I don't know that there's an answer to that, but it certainly
not without going back and asking Tolkien.
I wish we could, but you know what? If I had 5 minutes, that isn't one of the questions I'd ask. Really?
I probably would at this point.
You brought me back.
So much time looking for this one.
You've got 5 minutes to talk to the greatest author who ever lived, and you're going to ask him about the gender pronouns for rivers.
If I've got a time machine and I can go back and talk to Professor Tolkien, I'm just going to keep going back and getting another 5 minutes.
That's true. I'm thinking of I see. So it's kind of like the 3 wishes and the third wish is I wish for 3 more wishes. That's cheating. Yeah. Cheating, cheater.
And I got a time machine. I can go back as many times as I want.
That's true. I guess having a time machine pretty much makes you a cheater in the first place.
Yeah.
Really.
Or a Time Lord.
Or a Time Lord. There is that. So let's see. What do we get next? We get a little bit about a comparison of the realms. That the Finrod's land was certainly the greatest, though in all honesty, it doesn't look like there were a lot of people in most of those areas outside of Nargothrond itself. But it's funny because he was the biggest in terms of land, but he was the youngest of all the great lords of the Noldor.
Right.
But Fingolfin, back up in Mithrim now, was overlord of all the Noldor, and his son Fingon after him. So, and there we go. It even says that people were the most hardy and valiant, very much like Steadfast, right there. So let's see. Let's go ahead.
I like the fact that, again, it's just kind of a reminder that, Fingolfin was the overlord. And just, I don't know. We talked about this a little bit. Yeah, there we go. Was it
Overlord sounds so dark.
Well, it's in there. Overlord's in there.
You're right. Yeah, no. Of course, he is the overlord of all the Noldor. That's true.
He's the overlord.
Overlord.
But again, I keep going back to this idea that his people didn't move from the battlefront. They just they camped out there and they stayed there because that's where they the orcs.
Right.
That's where the orcs were, and that's where they were fighting. And
they're looking for a fight, not land.
Yeah, they're not going looking for big realms. They didn't come to Beleriand to be kings of to get big land holdings.
No, you can almost see Fingolfin. One day, lad, all this will be yours. What, the curtains? No, not the curtains, lad. All you can see stretched out over the hills and valleys of this land. But mother, father.
Oh man, that's right.
I don't want any of that. Sorry. How much longer do you want me to go?
I love that you have that whole thing in your head.
Man.
It's brilliant.
I'd rather just sing. None of that. Of course, I had that whole movie in my head. Shawn, are you kidding me?
Well, I think that's par for the course for.
It's like the entrance to nerd. That's like nerd freshman class 101.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's true.
Sorry, I apologize, but I hope it was fun.
You made me laugh.
Well, that's one of you. Let's have you read the next paragraph. I'm sorry.
I'll pick it up here.
I built the first castle. It sank into the swamp. So I built another one. It sank into the swamp. I built a third one. That burned down, fell to the ground, and sank into the swamp.
And then sank into the swamp.
But the fourth one,
Oh, man.
Sorry.
Swamp Castle.
Seriously, good stuff. Well, yeah, that means that he would have built it. So that kind of doesn't fit, right? Because Swamp Castle would be over by Lyn Iwan.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Turgon's realm.
That's right. Wow.
Oh, way too much crossover. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Let me
so tell us a little bit about East Beleriand.
Let's
and
do that.
the scary place. Tell me about the scary place, Daddy.
I've already told you about the Overlord of the Noldor. So, upon the left hand of Sirion lay East Beleriand, at its widest 100 leagues from Sirion to Gelion, and the borders of Osiriand. And first, between Sirion and Mindeb, lay the empty land of Dimbar, under the peaks of the Chrysaegrim, abode of eagles. Between Mindeb and the upper waters of Escalduin lay the no-land of Nan Dungortheb, and that region was filled with fear. For upon its one side the power of Melian fenced the north march of Doriath, but upon the other side the sheer precipices of Ered Gorgoroth, mountains of terror, fell down from high Dorthonion. Thither, as was earlier told, Ungoliant had fled from the whips of the Balrogs, and there she dwelt a while, filling the ravines with her deadly gloom. And there still, when she had passed away, her foul offspring lurked and wove their evil nets. And the thin waters that spilled from Ered Gorgoroth were defiled and perilous to drink. For the hearts of those that tasted them were filled with shadows of madness and despair. All living things else shunned that land, and the Noldor would pass through Nan Dungortheb only at great need, by paths near to the borders of Doriath, and furthest from the haunted hills. That way was made long before, in the time ere Morgoth returned to Middle-earth. And if one fared upon it, he came eastwards to Escalduin, where still there stood in the days of the siege the stone bridge of Yant-Yaur. Thence he passed through Dordinen, the silent land, and crossing the Arosiach, which signifies the fords of Aros, came to the north marches of Beleriand, where dwelt the sons of Feanor.
Yant-Yaur. Wow. Good job. I'm just going to say I did not want to take that paragraph because I did not want to figure out how to say that.
I asked for it before I remembered that it was in there.
I know. You wanted to talk about Ungoliant. And I only let you because there was no dialogue, because, of course, if Ungoliant was talking, I would have to have taken that.
Oh, you would totally. Someday we're going to have you do the Swamp Castle bit in Ungoliant. Ungoliant and Treebeard doing the Swamp Castle.
That might be way over the top.
We'll do that as another outtake someday.
Oh, my goodness. Maybe I'll try it after we finish recording.
Oh, man. Yeah, I want to take
scary, creepy place, huh?
So scary. I mean, I think we need to take a moment to appreciate.
Oh, yeah.
The Noldor will not pass through it unless they have great need. I mean, these are Noldor returned from Valinor.
Kick butt elves who, chase Morgoth's people orcs right back to the gates.
Yeah, these are people who've had dinner with Varda.
And they're afraid of spiders.
Afraid of this terrifying forest.
Yeah. That's a scary, scary place.
Yeah, it reminds me of we talked about this before. You never played EverQuest.
I did not. I missed out on Evercrack. I did.
Yeah. Probably these days. I'm sure a lot of our listeners are probably more into Lord of the Rings Online or something. But I played EverQuest years ago. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. That's like way after my time. I played EverQuest back in 2000, 2001. Yeah. And there was this one zone called Kithakor Forest that was like filled with these high-level undead at night. And it was just like this. It's like, and I actually played a high elf paladin. So I kind of feel like...
Of course you did.
Of course I did.
Of course you did.
So I was literally one of those Noldor who was scared to run through this haunted forest. But I had to do it many times.
I bet you did, but only in the daytime and nearest to Doriath.
Exactly. I would run along the northern edge of the zone.
I'm almost sad I missed that, but no, I'm a little older than you, and when I grew up, playing video games, multiplayer meant you had two joysticks and you gave one to your buddy that was sitting next to you on the couch.
Oh yeah, man.
On your Atari 2600, So MMOs didn't really do it for me. They never have until Lord of the Rings Online, and even then I mostly soloed stuff, and I enjoy it. Yeah. I think the environment's beautiful. I love there's a richness to it that I really enjoy, but I've got 2 kids
Yeah,
and a podcast and 2 businesses.
you don't-
and I don't have time.
You don't have
anymore. I
time
haven't played.
to sit around and play MMOs.
Don't I wish? Don't I wish?
And
I am
boy,
on
they suck good.
Landreval. For those who are playing, I am on the Landreval server. Durthal is my main character. He's a captain that's woefully underpowered. That means Dark Helm. I do have a story. Anyway.
Oh, yeah. Cool. Nice. Maybe I'll check it out someday.
Yeah,
but
someday.
2 little kids and a podcast and a full-time job.
I just don't have
Probably not gonna
time.
happen.
I play like 5 minutes a month, which means logging in to see if I have any money or mail.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. Terrifyingly scary place.
Yeah.
So-
Amazing. And, another thing I just kind of picked up on, I think we never found out for sure what the fate of Ungoliant was. We had one of those some have said.
Right. That's right. One of Tolkien's famous some have said moments.
Yeah. Here we see that after she died, her children.
You're right. When she had passed away. So she passed away in that area. We don't know exactly how, but certainly the way she went seems
and
to
certainly
fit.
at some time around now, because we know that
First age,
this
for sure.
landmass is not going to be there at the end of the first age.
No, it will not. Yeah, I almost said that in the middle of Fangorn's poetry there. I almost said spoiler alert when he said, and all these lands lay under the wave.
I'm sorry. Well, the second people look at the Lord of the Rings map and they see Ered Lindon.
Ocean. They see ocean on the other side of the Ered Lindon. It's like,
oops, Beleriand's gone.
Yeah, well, I think we kind of get the feel that that's going to happen at some point.
Yeah, I think so.
But you're right. It would have had to happen in that time frame, and then her foul offspring lurked there and wove their evil nets. The water made me think of that kind of black little creek in Mirkwood that the hearts tasted were filled with shadows of madness and despair.
That's right. Yeah,
A little different because they ended up falling asleep. Not so much madness and despair, but kind of hallucinatory, I guess.
Probably, almost certainly a lesser,
lesser enchantment,
a less malicious enchantment. Yeah,
but again, now I know that supposedly is the king's magic, but I wonder if it has more to do with the spiders, since the spiders of Mirkwood are Ungoliant's grandchildren.
That's right. Yeah,
or and great grandchildren. She's their descendants.
Right.
So yeah,
that's an interesting thought. Yeah,
I'll have to take a look and confirm that the river's magic is supposedly sourced in Thranduil. Not that he's named in The Hobbit. He's just the Elven King.
Just the Elven King.
But
while you're looking that up, find out if that river's a boy or a girl too.
Well, it's a stream, so maybe it's a boy.
There you go.
Congratulations, Mom, Mr. and Mrs. River.
It's a stream.
It's a stream. I've always wanted a stream. He's got your river bend. He's got your mouth.
Oh, man.
Boom, boom, boom.
Wow, that was a Shawn-worthy pun.
That was really good. Oh, man, I'm going to have good dreams of that one tonight. I
didn't mean that was a good thing.
Oh, okay.
No, I mean, it's
fair enough.
Fair enough. I'm the king of the bad puns around here. Man. No, that's awesome. I like that.
He's got your mouth.
He's got your mouth.
That wins the internets today.
Yeah, it really does.
Okay. I'm going to try to put that comedy behind me and read the next paragraph where we learn a little bit more about Doriath.
Yeah.
Southward lay the guarded woods of Doriath, abode of Thingol the hidden king, into whose realm none passed save by his will. Its northern and lesser part, the forest of Neldoreth, was bounded east and south by the dark river Escalduin, which bent westward in the midst of the land. And between Aros and Escalduin lay the denser and greater woods of Region. Upon the southern bank of Escalduin, where it turned westward toward Sirion, were the caves of Menegroth. And all Doriath lay east of Sirion, save for a narrow region of woodland between the meeting of Teiglin and Sirion and the Meres of Twilight. By the people of Doriath, this wood was called Nivrim, the West March. Great oak trees grew there, and it was also encompassed within the girdle of Melian, that so some portion of Sirion which she loved in reverence of Ulmo should be wholly under the power of Thingol.
That's cool. I like that.
Yeah. I really, it's just a neat little description, but I love the oak trees and that she had to have a portion of Sirion, inside the
completely,
girdle.
inside the girdle. Yeah.
Yeah, we can't let the entire river be, overrun by orcs.
Yeah, right, exactly.
We also get the proper
really...
pronunciation, and this is key, of Region.
Yes.
It looks like the English word region. It's not. It's the Sindarin word Region.
Yep.
And that, you need to remember that for Lord of the Rings, because you find out about the land of Eregion.
Eregion, yeah.
Not just Lord of the Rings, but that shows up in Unfinished Tales.
That'll show up at the end of the
shows up at the
end
of
of the Silmarillion, of the Rings of Power.
Yep, exactly. So a very important place, and just, another little language tip.
And also one last neat little thing about the geography of that. This is something I tend to forget, is that it's actually two forests. Region is the bigger one, and then Neldareth is the smaller. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a...
You wonder if there's, much of a difference in terms of, like the kinds of trees that grow there or things. It does sound like there's a little tiny difference in the sliver, Nivern, the West March, on the other side of the
side of the Sirion, part of Region. That's an interesting question. Yeah, because when you look at it on the map, it really looks like it would be one continuous forest if it weren't for the river running. The river, which river is that? That's actually the Escaldwin running through it.
Right.
So that's interesting.
Yeah, probably really similar, but just curious.
Yeah.
We won't read the next paragraph, but we'll cover a little bit of it. We find out about the marshes and the Twilight Mirrors. And we get a little bit more of just the land itself, right? We find out a little bit more about, we get Narog, we get more on the rivers. We get where Nargothrond actually is. And we get this really cool thing about the gates of Sirion. This is interesting because so 25 leagues east of the Gorge of Nargothrond, so that's about 75 miles, Sirion falls from the north, the text says, in a mighty fall below the mirrors, and he plunged suddenly underground into great tunnels that the weight of his falling waters delved. And he issued again 3 leagues southward. That's 6 miles of underwater
that it's actually
river.
Going underground.
6 miles of underground river.
Yeah.
Before it comes out through these arches at the foot of the hills called the Gates of Sirion. What an amazing sight.
That's an amazing image, yeah.
I mean, that would definitely be like a national park if we were...
For sure, yeah.
I mean, that would be like the huge, cool thing to go see. You got to make sure you see
the Falls of Sirion National Park, yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Just
and you do see it. Yeah, you can see it on the map too, can't you? I'm looking at it now.
Yeah.
Right there, just below the Fens of Sirion, you've got the Falls of Sirion, and then you see it emerge just
out of nowhere, right there.
Yeah, right next to where it says Gates of Sirion on the map. You see this little hillock thing, and it's coming out of that. It's really cool.
Pretty amazing to think of. You wonder what kind of geology is in that area. I mean, clearly the rocks are not. We're not talking about granite, or it never would have been able to carve its way through, but maybe something softer like a sandstone or something like that.
Yeah, sure.
Just intriguing. You wonder, you really wish you could see that, and I'm sure geologists have probably discussed this, and I bet we might even get an email from a geologist saying that we're some idiots for talking about it like this. But please be nice to us. We're not geologists.
No, we're not.
But yeah,
and sometimes we just say what's on our mind, and
pretty much all the time. I mean,
we prepare.
He's right that we prepare a little bit, but basically we prepare by putting together an outline of the chapter and picking which passages we want to read.
Yeah, and then just running with it.
And then we pretty much just run with it. So,
and it shows sometimes.
Oh, yes, it does.
I want. Do you have anything else on that paragraph? Because I kind of want to talk about this. This Androm.
Yeah, well, that's actually what I was going to talk about next, is that string of mountains, the Androm, that runs all the way from Nargothrond all the way over into East Beleriand. So go ahead and talk to us about that.
Yeah, it's just just a neat formation. This line of hills that just cuts across Beleriand. We see that in the east it became ever less sheer, so it's gradually kind of sloping downwards. It's and you can even see that on the map. It's definitely steeper on the western end. And then let's see, we've got over in towards the east, there's this one hill on its own called Amon Areb, which is actually where Denethor died, the Lord of the Nandor.
Yes, not the steward of
not the steward of Gondor, but the other Denethor, who we've already mentioned once in this podcast. So,
but who's dead now?
Yeah, he's wow.
Well, you know,
don't sugarcoat it.
Moving on.
But it's I don't know. This is just a cool formation to me.
It really is, isn't it? It's this is the kind of thing I'd love to hear a geologist talk about. You know, what would have formed this? What sort of? But of course, you know, I think a lot of times, you know, I have read stuff about how geologists are driven crazy by some of the mountain formations and rivers and things that are like, it would never happen like that. You know, and I'm sure that would be an area where Tolkien probably didn't have. You know, the same kind of knowledge that he has about languages, and probably made some things that you know, couldn't be in real life.
Yeah.
Anyway, good section there, and I think I've got you reading the next paragraph, talking to us a little bit about the river Gelion.
Yep. So I'll go through this in the next paragraph, actually.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Gelion was a great river, and he rose in two sources and had at first two branches: Little Gelion, that came from the hill of Himring, and Greater Gelion, that came from Mount Rerir. From the meeting of his arms he flowed south for 40 leagues before he found his tributaries, and before he found the sea he was twice as long as Sirion, though less wide and full. For more rain fell in Hithlum and Dorthonion, whence Sirion drew his waters, than in the east. From Ered Luin flowed the 6 tributaries of Gelion: Askar, that was after named Rathloriel, Thalos, Legoland, Brilthor, Duelwyn, and Adirant, swift and turbulent streams, falling steeply from the mountains. And between Askar in the north and Adirant in the south, and between Gelion and Ered Luin, lay the far green country of Osiriand, the land of 7 rivers. Now at a point nearly midway in its course, the stream of Adirant divided and then joined again, and the island that its waters enclosed was named Tol Gallen, the Green Isle. Mm-hmm. There Beren and Luthien dwelt after their return. Excellent bit of foreshadowing there.
Yeah, I love that. I was about to mention that.
In Osiriand dwelt the Green Elves in the protection of their rivers. For after Sirion, Ulmo loved Gelion above all the waters of the western world. The woodcraft of the Elves of Osiriand was such that a stranger might pass through their land from end to end and see none of them. They were clad in green in spring and summer, and the sound of their singing could be heard even across the waters of Gelion. Wherefore the Noldor named that country Lindon, the land of music, and the mountains beyond they named Ered Lindon, for they first saw them from Osiriand.
I have a question. If they were clad in green in spring and summer, what did they wear in fall and winter? Sorry. Were they not clad at all?
Their birthday suits, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I want to know. No, I'm sorry.
Their natural brown elvish skin. I don't know, probably orange. I don't know. Probably orange in autumn. Yeah. Wow.
Beautiful land, though. I mean, I'm imagining these kind of, you know, foothills, you know, rolling hills coming from the mountains. The streams are all fairly swift. So they're, you know, they really are protected. I mean, rivers are not easy to cross. So, you know, they've got Gelion protecting them on the west, and they've got the mountains protecting them on the east. And they've got these 7 rivers, so even somebody coming from the north or south is really going to have to
cross
stop.
A lot of rivers to get. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So amazing. But I do love that little foreshadowing. All the way that the southernmost tributary is a little island, and that island's going to have some history, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is.
Beautiful.
Oh, can't wait to get to that part.
I know. Good stuff.
And then so real quickly, I know we've got a couple more passages to get through here, but Ered Lindon, same thing as the Ered Luin. Just you know, one means blue mountains, one means the mountains of song,
right?
Or the mountains of music. So I don't know. And then again, this is one of those. I guess this is the only part of Beleriand that you see in the third age maps.
That's true. That is true. You know, the Grey Havens end up being somewhere along here, right?
Yeah, they're. I want to say they're just south of Nogrod, on the. Like, because there's the Gulf of Loon that cuts into the mountains, and I think it's
right there. I think you're right.
Well, I can click to the map of Middle Earth, and I can see. Oh, well, I don't see Novgorod on that map, so I don't know, but it's somewhere around there for sure.
Yeah, you're right. That would be, interesting. We'll have to see. I know some folks have done some interesting jobs of blending the two maps, so I'll have to see if I can find that. But certainly in that region,
you have to think the Gulf was. Yeah, I mean, you have to think the Gulf was formed by one of these rivers. You know, when Beleriand sank into the ground. Sorry, spoilers. Sank into the water. You kind of imagine that one of these rivers, or maybe a couple of these rivers, became this Gulf as they flooded.
Become a Gulf. Yeah, that makes sense. Interesting stuff. Well, like you said, we do have a little bit to get through. Surprisingly, we've not. I thought for sure this would be like 40 minutes, and we'd be twiddling our thumbs, going, "Well, we've just talked about a map for 40 minutes," but. Actually, we've managed to stretch this out for a very long time. People are going to be very upset with us that we've talked about a map for so long.
Hopefully, we've kept it a little bit interesting.
I think we've tried.
Folks, but yeah.
So now we're going to get a little bit of Feanor's line. We're going to touch on this fairly quickly.
Okay.
East of Dorthonion, the marches of Beleriand were most open to attack, and only hills of no great height guarded the Vale of Gelion from the north. In that region, upon the march of Maedhros and in the lands behind, dwelt the sons of Feanor with many people, and their riders passed often over the vast northern plain, Lothland, the wide and empty, east of Ardgallan, lest Morgoth should attempt any sortie towards East Beleriand. The chief citadel of Maedhros was upon the hill of Himring the Evercold, and that was wide-shouldered, bare of trees, and flat upon its summit, surrounded by many lesser hills. Between Himring and Dorthonion there was a pass, exceeding steep upon the west, and that was the pass of Aglon, and was a gate unto Doriath, and a bitter wind blew ever through it from the north. But Celegorm and Curufin fortified Aglon, and held it with great strength, and all the land of Himlad southward, between the river Eros that rose in Dorthonion, and his tributary Kelon that came from Himring. So looking at the map, that whole area of Himlad, down to,
Was it down to Kelon?
Down the Kelon. So the rose in Dorthonion. So all the land of Himlad southward between the Eros, which is that's not actually named here, is it? The Eros is. It's you can see the Erosiach.
You can see the Erosiach.
So that river, the Erosiach, or I'm sorry, that spot, that pass, those fords.
That pass.
That's the river Eros. So that rises in Dorthonion and goes down. So between there and Kelon is their land. So Nan Elmoth is not in it. So that's the little bit of forest south of the river Kelon, and we'll see that come into play soon. But yeah, the pass of Aglon is where Celegorm and Curufin are. The hill of Himring is where Maedhros is.
Right.
So you've already got some of the sons of Feanor. And now you're going to tell us a little bit. Well, let's see. Before we do that, let's take a look, because Maedhros, I think, is really important here.
I think it's interesting. Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, we talked a little bit about how he sort of took one for the team last time.
Right.
By choosing a realm that was right there on the battlefront, and there it is, right there on the hill of Himring. I mean, that's he's really on the front lines there. But really, the March, which means the border territory.
Yeah.
So. I thought that was neat. I thought there was kind of a nice symmetry with Fingon and Fingolfin. I like that because of the reconciliation that happened between them. It's just kind of cool. Not sure how much there is to say about it, but it's just kind of a neat little detail to pick out. Yeah.
Then we get then you go ahead and tell us about the next paragraph then, because that's where we get some more of them.
Yep. So between the arms of Gelion was the ward of Maglor, and here in one place the hills failed altogether. There it was that the orcs came into East Beleriand before the third battle. Therefore the Noldor held strength of cavalry in the plains at that place, and the people of Caranthir fortified the mountains to the east of Maglor's Gap. There Mount Rerir, and about it many lesser heights, stood out from the main range of Ered Lindon westward, and in the angle between Rerir and Ered Lindon there was a lake, shadowed by mountains on all sides, save the south. That was Lake Helivorn, deep and dark, and beside it Caranthir had his abode. But all the great land between Gelion and the mountains, and between Rerir and the river Askar, was called by the Noldor Thargelion, which signifies the land beyond Gelion, or Dor Caranthir, the land of Caranthir. And it was here that the Noldor first met the dwarves. But Thargelion was before called by the Grey Elves Talathrúnin, the East Vale.
I love those names. I love those names.
Yes,
Thargelion and Talathrúnin.
I love Talathrúnin. Yeah, that's just really cool.
It's interesting that Caranthir takes a lake that is actually protected from all sides but the south.
That's a really good point.
I got your back, brother, but, I'm going to have to come around the long way if you need me to show up for anything.
Wow. Well, it really kind of supports that idea we talked about last time.
Yeah.
Or was it 2 episodes ago, that he really wasn't that interested in fighting. He's just setting up his little trade empire right here.
Yep.
Right there where the dwarves are coming through with all their goods. That's just really neat.
It is interesting. We talked about Maedhros really being on the front line, and really it's Maglor, isn't it? I mean, Maedhros too. I mean, but Maglor is right there in a place
That's true, and the gap between Himring and Rare. Yeah.
It's Maglor's gap. I know it's not listed that on the map here. It just says March of Maedhros, which is talking about that whole region between the pass and the Arid Luin.
That's a good point, because even Maedhros, if he was on Himring, he would have been surrounded by mountains. So.
Right. He's on a tall mountain. He's able to see, far out into into Lothland. Yeah. Whereas, Maglor is, ground level, and he's definitely he's going to feel the point of the spear, no doubt.
Oh, yeah. Well, they're the good ones, aren't they? I mean,
they really are.
Maedhros and Maglor are always the ones that are more noble than the rest of the Fëanorians.
Yeah. I mean, at the end, they still have to do a very stupid thing.
Yeah.
But they know it too, It's just one of those things.
Right, exactly. They kind of have the most self-awareness of how ridiculous it is.
They really do. You're right.
It's kind of sad.
Yeah. But so let's go ahead and we'll finish it off with the last paragraph here. We're going to find out a little bit more about the last 2 sons of Fëanor. Mm-hmm. So the sons of Fëanor under Maedhros were the lords of East Beleriand, but their people were in that time mostly in the north of the land, and southward they rode only to hunt in the greenwoods. But there Amrod and Amras had their abode, and they came seldom northward while the siege lasted. And there also other of the elf lords would ride at times, even from afar, for the land was wild but very fair. Of these Finrod Felagund came most often, for he had great love of wandering, and he came even into Osiriand, and won the friendship of the Green Elves. But none of the Noldor went ever over Arid Linden, while their realm lasted, and little news and late came into Beleriand of what passed in the regions of the east. Finrod the Wanderer likes the long road trips.
He does, yeah. Well, it's, he's the wise one. I mean, I think we do see somewhere that he's the wisest of all the Noldor in Middle-earth.
Yep.
You kind of see him just riding around, just learning about the land, and
pretty cool.
That is going to come into play in a couple of chapters here.
Yes, it will. And I also find it interesting that Amrod and Amras, don't hang out with their brothers up north. They kind of hide.
What do you make of that?
I don't know. I don't know that there's anything to make of it other than there weren't any places on the map to stick another pair of twins. I mean,
yeah. Tolkien just ran out of.
There's no more real estate. Where do I give these guys some space? But
right.
But the fact that they seldom came north tells me that they maybe weren't involved with, some of the great battles we're going to see later. But
yeah,
there's not much to say about them. There hasn't been much to say. They're 2 that do disappear. We get a lot of flavor of Maglor and Maedhros, and quite a bit of Celegorm and
Curufin for sure, yeah.
And Caranthir, especially when
he shows up a couple of times, yeah.
Beren and Lúthien's story, we get quite a bit of those 2. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we don't really get anything on Amrod and Amras. So
yeah, that's true.
Interesting stuff. But boy, we've managed to fill a pretty full episode talking about a map. Who would have guessed? But that, that does actually wrap it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony podcast. So we want to thank you, listeners, for joining us, especially on an episode like this.
Yes, and please join us again next time. We promise we're going to get back to the story with Chapter 15 of the Noldor and Beleriand.
Oh, things are going to start getting a little rougher for the Noldor in exile. And this time, it's not going to come directly from... Well, okay, it's not going to come directly from Morgoth, shall we say?
Yeah, sure. That's probably all we should say about it for right now. We'll have to read the next chapter to find out more.
And please do. And remember, of course, if you still need a cheap paperback to mark up, you can use the links on our library page at theprancingponypodcast.com. We also have links to audiobooks and some music CDs, a few other cool things for your Tolkien collection.
And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to us on iTunes or Google Play Music. We need your iTunes reviews, so please leave one if you haven't, and we greatly appreciate your support.
That we do. Sorry, I wanted to reach out and thank and thank those of you who have. We did that last time, but I wanted to repeat that because we're super grateful for it.
We really are. Yeah, it just helps us continue to grow our audience and keep getting great questions in. So, Thank you. We're also on Stitcher and TuneIn, and thanks to those of you who are visiting us and commenting to us on social media. As we always say, this is The Prancing Pony, and you can join us in the common room on Facebook at The Prancing Pony Podcast or on Twitter at Prancing Pony Pod.
Well, and social media is a great place to share our podcast as well. Please retweet us, share us, tell your friends. And one
some
last
of you are, and we do thank you for that.
We do. And, we really do appreciate it because it's so important. But one last thing, as always, don't forget to send your questions, comments, or your list of the top 5 most masculine rivers of Middle-earth to the Prancing Pony Podcast at gmail.com. And we'll try to get them into our next episode. Well, an hour 50-something is still far too short a time to spend amongst such admirable listeners. But until next time.
Farewell, friends.